Well, a warm welcome to today's talk, Thursday the 21st of March. Now, not only are we seeing an excess of deaths around the world, we're also seeing a change in the pattern of disease and more chronic disease. Now, I'm going to play you a very brief exchange here from the Houses of Parliament. And Mr. Bridgen, the Member of Parliament, is saying there's 700,000 more people on long-term sick than there was in the spring of 2021. And the Minister questions this, but I'm going to give you evidence that the Minister was wrong and Mr. Bridgen was right, that the increase in sickness did spike after spring 2021, which of course is when the COVID vaccines rolled out. Doesn't mean it was the cause, of course, but it's an interesting correlation. But the Minister's quick to dismiss it. The Minister says it certainly does not subscribe to the view that vaccination is unsafe. Note he didn't say safe and effective. They seem to have dropped the effective bit. Let's watch the speech now, then we'll give the evidence.
Drew Bridgen.
The number of long-term sick has risen from 2.1 million pre-pandemic to 2.8 million today. The huge increase started in spring 2021 at the same time as the rollout of the experimental emergency use vaccines. Or does the Minister have an alternative explanation for the unprecedented rise in long-term sickness in the UK since spring 2021?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, one of the major drivers of this increase to which the Honourable Gentleman refers is actually mental health issues, musculoskeletal issues as well. And I think I'm not entirely sure that he's accurate when he says that the upward trajectory in those numbers actually occurred just as vaccination occurred. I think it predated that moment. And I certainly do not subscribe to the view that vaccination is in any way unsafe.
So let's look at the references for that, as we always do. This is available on Mr. Bridgen's Twitter site, and it's also available on his YouTube channel, as are several other official narrative challenging videos, which of course is good. How can senior politicians still stand up and say COVID vaccines are safe? It really is incredible. They're kind of doubling down on this. So when the truth is finally revealed about what's going on here and the level of adverse reactions, really it's going to be, well, I can't imagine what's going to happen. Anyway, let's look at this. So that's the tweet there. Long-term sick has risen by over 700,000 people since the spring of 2021. This coincides with the rollout of the experimental COVID-19 vaccines. Now, the Minister questioned this. Now, here's evidence from the HEART Group, Health Advisory and Recovery Team. And of course, there's the reference. Now, they put forward a couple of graphics here. Economically inactive because of long-term sickness. So this is basically people that are in long-term sick and claiming benefits for long-term sickness. Now, of course, a lot of people are mentally ill. That's beyond question. And a lot of people are riding the mental health bandwagon, of course, working the ticket on this, which, of course, is inexcusable because it means that people that are genuinely suffering, and believe me, you do suffer from mental illness. It's a proper illness. That they're sort of being diluted and tarred with the same brush. That's a pity. Musculoskeletal injuries, of course, are always with us, particularly bad backs. So why that should have changed particularly, I don't really know. But here's the graphic here. So here we see, this is February to April 2021 that I'm pointing to. And there, the time when the effects of the vaccines would be starting to take effect, and we do see a dramatic increase. So that is in women. So we see that Mr. Bridgen was correct. And then when we look at the graphic for men here, April to June 2021, we see a rapid increase. There is a bit of a bump there, of course, but that was during the COVID pandemic, when you would expect people to be ill with the virus and suffering some after effects of the virus for several weeks. Not at all surprising. So we do see this definite increase there. Exactly what Mr. Bridgen said. So Mr. Bridgen correct, Minister wrong. And really you would expect the Minister to be better prepared than this. That's really quite sloppy from a government minister. Unless, of course, no, we won't go there. Right, now let's look at the changing pattern of death in the UK as well. Now, again, major disappointments here. Let me just show you what I mean. We've been looking at data for a long time from the Office for Health Improvements and Disparities. That's the reference for that there. But when you go on the site today, this is what came up. This analysis is no longer being updated. Data covers the 20th of March 2020, fair enough, to the 29th of December 2023. They are not updating this data for 2024. Why on earth would a government department not want to monitor why its people are dying? This really is difficult to explain, and it's enough to make you feel a little bit paranoid, actually. But of course, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. But that really is quite incredible that we've got this time of excess deaths. And of course, the Office for National Statistics has just changed the way it monitors excess deaths, and that has dramatically reduced the apparent excess deaths throughout 2023. Made no difference at all, of course, to the amount of people that died and the grieving relatives. That's made no difference at all, but it looks better. Doesn't look as bad on the government now, presumably, because throughout 2023, it now looks as if many fewer excess people have died, but of course, it's made no difference at all. That's what's done. And now the Office for Health Improvements and Disparities seems to be also shall we say, not giving us all the data we would like. So for probably the last time, let's look at their data, because after this it's not being updated. This will be the last one. So we see excess mortality in England for all people, and it's been higher, somewhat higher during the pandemic. Of course, we know a lot of people died from midazolam overdose during the pandemic, unfortunately. Morphine and midazolam given in combination, which did kill quite a few people. We now know that. How many of those died from midazolam, of course, we don't know. Some did genuinely die from the COVID virus, of course. So 2021 excess deaths, 2022 excess deaths, 2023 excess deaths. But it does seem to be going down there in the very last week of 2023. Unfortunately, this is not genuine. This is because the data is delayed over the Christmas and New Year period. From Christmas, of course, to New Year's Day, last week of the year. And normally, of course, that will go into next year's data. But hey, you're not going to get to see next year's data because it's no longer being displayed. Absolutely, absolutely incredible, really, that this would happen. So excess deaths in all persons. Alas, moving on to excess deaths in the 0 to 24-year-old group. And again, we see this was higher started to go up in 2021, higher in 2022, higher in 2023. And again, sadly, that apparent reduction there is not genuine. So increased deaths in the children and young people's age group. In the age group 25 to 49, again, great increases all through this period. In the age group 50 to 64, again, increases throughout this entire period. And in 2022, 2023, the vast majority of these are not COVID related in any way, shape or form. These are other causes of people dying. But after 31st of December 2023, we're not going to know. They're not going to collect the data anymore. You sense my frustration. People 65 to 74, again, similar pattern. 75 to 78, similar pattern of excess deaths. And 85 plus, similar pattern of excess deaths. So we see that the excess deaths are particularly affecting middle-aged people, but are affecting all age groups. And it's really quite appalling that the data only goes from 0 to 24. It really should go from 0 to 12 and then 12 to 24 or even smaller categories. Why don't they release this data for year by year? I mean, they could do that. They've got really clever computers in these things. They can click buttons and make all sorts of things happen. But the data is not made readily available, which is unfortunate. Moving on, I think we move on now to the cause of death. Yeah, changes of causes of death since 2021. Now here we clearly see ischemic heart disease. So lack of blood supply to the myocardium, coronary arterial disease. Very often atheroma developing in the coronary arteries, or who knows, other types of clot developing in the coronary arteries, including the blood supply to the myocardium. So, yep, that's been high 2021, 2022, 2023. But of course, we won't know for 2024 because they're not collecting it. Excess mortality. This one is cerebrovascular disease. Now, cerebrovascular is the blood supply to the cerebrum, to the brain. So this is mostly strokes. And again, we see this increase in deaths from these cerebrovascular causes. Heart failure. Now, just look at the increase in heart failure. I mean, I think it's fair to say we have an epidemic of heart failure. So the heart is just no longer able to contract efficiently like a pump. It's unable to generate sufficient cardiac output to meet the metabolic demands of the body in terms of supplying glucose and supplying oxygen to the body. And also you can get a backlog of blood resulting in collections of fluid in the lungs and in the periphery, pulmonary and systemic edema. What is causing all this increase in heart failure? Again, this is something we should really be free to discuss openly. And one of the strange trends we have been watching is the classification of other respiratory diseases. And that's down. So many less deaths from this than we would expect. And this has been the case really for quite some time. Rather hard to explain why that should be the case. It looks like many more people are dying from the vascular causes than the respiratory causes. And, as we're about to see now, this one is, in a minute, Alzheimer's disease, it's not what I was thinking of, Alzheimer's disease, slightly down, and we would expect this because sadly more old people have died of late, as we've seen. So Alzheimer's disease deaths down slightly. And this is the one I was thinking of, cirrhosis of the liver. Now, cirrhosis of the liver is scar tissue forming in the liver. Cirrhosis is the end product. It's a scarred, fibrosed liver with fibrous scar tissue in it. And it's the end result of any chronic inflammatory disease of the liver. So what could be causing this inflammatory disease of the liver, resulting in this huge increase in the amount of people suffering from cirrhosis? This doesn't tell us that, but it does tell us there is a lot of extra cirrhosis beyond what we would normally expect in terms of cause of death. So Office for National Statistics has changed the way it collects its data. It looks like there's less people dying now in 2023. Office for Health Improvement and Disparities, whose data we've been using for a good few years now, looking at deaths at different age groups and looking at the causes of death, scrubbed. For 2024, we simply won't know. So from this website, at least, from this official government site, this time next year, we're not going to know any more than we know at the end of December 2023. Ministers still completely denying there's any problem, and obvious questions being asked, ministers getting it wrong, or at least giving very incomplete answers, and it's enough to make you suspicious. And this is not conspiracy theory. I think in this video we've given evidence to suggest that there are questions to be answered. How long can the government go on denying this problem is a question I'll leave you to think about. But for now, with disappointment in the established institutions of my country, thank you for watching.